Hey guys, tonight we slip through time and duck under the massive red gates of the Forbidden City. You can almost feel the heavy wood pressing back against your hand, painted with layers of lacquer so thick the color still gleams centuries later. The air is crisp, but a little smoky from braziers burning pine and sandalwood, and the echo of boots on stone follows you deeper into the world you're not supposed to see. Concubines, yes, the mysterious figures you've heard whispers about, spent their lives inside this maze of courtyards, chambers, and hidden staircases. It wasn't a fairy tale of jewels and silks, though those certainly appeared. It was also a gilded cage with rules tighter than your phone's screen time app. And you, lucky or unlucky, probably wouldn't survive a week here. One wrong look at the wrong minister, and poof, you're yesterday's dumpling. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love knowing where and when you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the first courtyard and notice how eerily quiet it feels, despite the fact that thousands once lived here. The Forbidden City wasn't just home to emperors. It held armies of eunuchs, attendants, and yes, hundreds of women brought in as concubines. For them, the gates weren't just an entryway, they were a one-way door. Once inside, you weren't walking out again unless banishment or death intervened. Historians still argue whether this was a privilege or a slow-burn punishment, because depending on your fortune, it could mean silk cushions and power, or decades of loneliness. The layout itself tells you a lot. Every stone and garden path was designed to control movement. You can almost hear the shuffle of embroidered slippers on those long corridors, women drifting from their quarters to lessons or ceremonies. Imagine being 20 years old, whisked away from your family, and told that your job now is to stay beautiful, graceful, and obedient until the emperor, maybe, possibly, notices you. Not quite the influencer deal you dreamed of, right? Still, there's no denying the grandeur. Red walls stretch endlessly, golden roof tiles shimmer like dragon scales, and carved lions glare at you with smug stone expressions. You'd be impressed if you weren't also acutely aware that the place is basically a social chessboard where you're the pawn. Concubines walked under painted beams depicting phoenixes and clouds, reminders that they were supposed to embody celestial harmony. Reality check. They often felt more like contestants in a never-ending reality show, competing for the ultimate like from one very powerful man. And here's the quirky tidbit. When foreign envoys visited, they sometimes thought the concubines lived lives of carefree luxury, like permanent spa guests. In truth, daily life was filled with rigid schedules, endless rules, and the pressure of politics. Think less Bridgerton, more office job with no weekends. As you wander deeper in, you might picture a concubine's first arrival. She'd have been carefully inspected, teeth checked, skin examined, even her gait assessed. Like auditioning for a part in a movie, except the director is the emperor, and there's no script. If accepted, she would be ranked and assigned quarters, her fate sealed by hierarchies she barely understood. Some would rise to be empresses, others would fade into shadows, barely remembered by anyone. What did she do all day? That's the question that will carry us through. But first, just let yourself feel the atmosphere. The cold stone underfoot, the flutter of silk sleeves brushing past, the faint clatter of hairpins as women bowed. You've crossed the threshold now, and from this point on, the world outside might as well not exist. The day begins before you're even fully awake. Somewhere in the distance, a massive bronze bell tolls, its sound rolling through the courtyards like thunder in slow motion. That's your alarm clock. Forget snooze buttons. Concubines in the Forbidden City didn't get to sleep in, not even when the nights were freezing or filled with anxious tossing. You pull yourself up from a lacquered bed, the mattress thin and firm, sheets heavy with embroidered silk that feels more decorative than comfortable. Servants hover nearby, already bustling like over-caffeinated assistants, and before you know it, the day is pulling you forward whether you're ready or not. The first task? Ritualized washing. Buckets of warm water are carried in, steam fogging the air, and you bend over porcelain basins while attendants dab at your face with cloths soaked in rose or chrysanthemum water. That's not just pampering, it's preparation. Every day is a performance. And if your skin looks dull or your hair refuses to shine, you're sliding down the invisible ladder of palace ranking. Historians still argue whether women truly obsessed over these rituals or whether later storytellers exaggerated them, but judging from the detailed manuals on grooming found in archives, it wasn't exactly optional. As you sit still, a maid combs your hair into intricate shapes, fixing jade pins or pearl ornaments in place. Imagine the weight, several ounces of gemstones balanced on your head before you've even had breakfast. And yes, one quirky tidbit, some women swore by pigeon droppings as a face mask for smooth skin. It sounds like the world's worst spa treatment, but hey, in an age before retinol and sheet masks, desperate times called for desperate pigeons. The bell's echo fades, replaced by the rhythm of daily drills. Eunuchs scurry like shadows, carrying scrolls, lighting lanterns, checking doors. You notice how everyone seems to move with quiet precision, as though noise itself might draw trouble. In the dim light of dawn, concubines shuffle from their chambers to designated spaces for attendance calls. You stand in line, head lowered, as officials mark who's present, who's ill, who's missing. Missing is bad news. Very bad. There's a chill in the air, and your silk shoes don't do much against the cold tiles. You feel the stone biting into your soles. That's deliberate. The environment reminds you, comfort is temporary, rules are eternal. You catch a glimpse of another concubine yawning too openly, and an attendant clicks his tongue disapprovingly. Imagine being punished just for looking sleepy. That's your reality now. Once the attendance is done, routines branch depending on rank. Higher-ranked concubines might receive visitors, usually older palace women offering lessons or subtle advice, while lower-ranked ones are shuttled to chores or practice sessions. You follow the flow, body moving automatically. There's no room for rebellion. The palace is like a machine, and you're one of its gears. You notice the subtle rivalry even this early in the morning. Women exchange polite bows but sneak quick glances to assess outfits, hair, posture. Did her robe get a fresher dye than yours? Did her attendant polish her hairpin more thoroughly? These details seem trivial, but here they can tilt fortunes. The emperor might not see you today, but a superior could, and every impression matters. It's exhausting, like living in an endless job interview where no one tells you the criteria. And yet, there's beauty in the monotony. The courtyard glows faintly gold as the sun rises, shadows sliding across carved balustrades. Birds swoop low over the rooftops, their cries sharp in the cold air. You breathe in the smell of pine smoke, incense, and something faintly metallic, maybe from the bronze urns nearby. It's surreal, like being trapped in a painting. One mainstream fact: the daily schedule was so rigid that even meals, prayers, and walks were timed to bells and drums. Records describe an almost military precision. If you think your school timetable was strict, this makes it look like free play. And unlike students, concubines couldn't just skip class. By the time the sun is fully up, you've already spent hours grooming, lining up, and silently competing without saying a word. Your stomach growls, but you can't just grab a snack. Meals are another ritual, another test, and we'll drift into that soon enough. For now, you realize that rising with the dawn bell isn't just about waking your body, it's about waking into a performance. Every single day, from your first breath to your last sigh before sleep. And let's be honest, as you stand there shivering in a jewel-heavy hairstyle, you can't help thinking, maybe those pigeons had the better deal. By now you've been counted, polished, and reminded that your spine must be straighter than a calligraphy brush. The morning rolls forward into its next ritual: grooming. Not the simple splash your face kind you do before running out the door. This is a full-blown production. Attendants bring in trays lined with porcelain bowls, bronze mirrors, and jars of powders. The smell of crushed herbs and oils hangs in the air, sharp enough to make you sneeze. But sneezing, by the way, is frowned upon. You hold it in. You sit on a low stool while another woman brushes your hair 100 strokes, as if the strands were delicate silk threads. The comb is carved from sandalwood, supposedly to calm the mind. A mainstream fact here: hair was considered the crown of virtue in ancient China, symbolizing not just beauty, but obedience to ritual. Cutting it without permission could be seen as defiance. And you? You're definitely not going to risk defiance when your whole survival depends on fitting into a system older than your grandmother's grandmother. Now comes the face. White powder is patted across your skin, giving you that ghost pale look popular at court. The paler the complexion, the higher the status, or so they believed. You might think, isn't this just early foundation? But it wasn't just about aesthetics. Pale skin hinted at a life of leisure indoors, away from sun-darkened labor. Historians still argue whether the powders actually enhance beauty or slowly poison women, since some recipes use lead. Imagine glowing today and, well, not glowing tomorrow. Your lips are dabbed with cinnabar paste, turning them a sharp red. It looks striking against the chalky whiteness of your cheeks. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some concubines reportedly chewed on petals of safflower to tint their mouths naturally. Others swore by rubbing crushed beetles onto their lips. Yeah, ancient lip gloss had a serious fear factor vibe. Eyes aren't ignored either. Powdered charcoal or even burnt willow twigs darken the brows. A maid carefully extends the lines, arching them into shapes said to resemble distant mountains. Poetic, yes, but also practical. The wrong brow curve could make you look too severe or too meek, traits that might affect how you are perceived. It's like palace-grade Photoshop, only with no undo button. Perfume follows. Tiny pouches filled with cloves, musk, or sandalwood are tucked into your sleeves. The fragrance clings to your robes and lingers when you walk by, a subtle message. In a world where words could get you in trouble, scent was a safer way of saying, "Notice me." Once you're fully dressed, layered in silk embroidered with peonies or cranes, the weight of expectation settles on you. Your reflection in the bronze mirror stares back, painted, powdered, perfected. But is it really you, or just the version the palace requires? You might feel trapped under the cosmetics as much as the walls. There's chatter among the women as they finish their grooming. Someone whispers about a new skin rinse made from pearl dust mixed with honey. Another swears by bathing her hands in donkey milk to keep them soft. Historians debate whether such luxuries were common practice or isolated exaggerations, but the gossip itself was real. Grooming wasn't just about looks. It was about trading secrets, testing alliances, and sneaking in light humor before the heavier weight of politics later in the day. And here comes your 3 times per section comic relief. First, you realize pigeon droppings might be trending again. Ancient beauty TikTok, anyone? Second, when the cinnabar paste smears and stains your sleeve, you think that's going to cost someone a week's allowance. And third, as your attendant keeps brushing your hair well past the 100th stroke, you mutter inside your head, "Lady, my scalp's not a temple gong." By the time you're fully prepared, hours have passed. You're exhausted, and the emperor hasn't even glanced your way. The irony of palace life is that most days weren't about direct seduction. They were about preparation, maintaining a version of yourself that might be summoned at any time. You're like a performer waiting in the wings, not knowing if your scene will ever come. Still, as you stand and let your robes fall into place, the silks rustle like whispers. The courtyard outside hums with faint sound. Drums in the distance, birds above the tiled roofs, footsteps echoing on stone. You're polished, perfumed, and perfectly placed in the hierarchy of beauty. Whether that translates into power or invisibility, well, that's the gamble of being a concubine. By the time you're dressed, perfumed, and half suffocated under silk layers, the morning has only just begun. No TikTok scrolling for you. Now it's lesson time. Concubines weren't expected to sit idle all day like ornamental statues. Instead, they had to cultivate the kind of elegance that would impress the emperor, the court, and the chroniclers who might one day decide whether your name was remembered or erased. So you shuffle toward the lesson hall, the embroidered soles of your shoes whispering against polished tiles. Inside, the room smells faintly of ink and incense. Low tables are scattered with zither strings, bamboo flutes, and stacks of poetry scrolls. You lower yourself onto a cushion, spine straight, hands folded, waiting for the instructor to appear. These instructors are usually older women, sometimes former courtesans, sometimes widows of scholars. They carry themselves like strict school teachers, the kind who'd give you detention for breathing too loud. The zither, gukin, is first. Its 7 strings hum softly as your fingers pluck tentative notes. Mainstream fact. In ancient China, mastering the guqin wasn't just about music. It was considered a path to moral cultivation. A woman who played gracefully was assumed to possess inner harmony. You can almost hear the gentle twang echo across centuries, vibrating through your fingertips. But don't get too relaxed. If your nails snag a string, you'll hear the sharp intake of breath from your instructor, a silent dagger of disapproval. Then comes poetry. You're handed a brush, dipped in ink so black it gleams like oil, and told to copy verses from the Book of Songs. Your wrist trembles as you trace characters. Calligraphy isn't just handwriting here, it's a reflection of your soul. A crooked line suggests a crooked heart. Historians still argue whether emperors truly valued concubines' poetry or just enjoyed the show, but records do survive of poems written by palace women, some melancholy, some playful, some rebellious in coded ways. Imagine pouring your loneliness into elegant brushstrokes, only to have it locked in an archive no one reads for centuries. And here's your quirky tidbit of the day. Some concubines secretly compose poems mocking each other, hiding the verses in embroidery or slipping them under teacups. Think of it as ancient burn books, only written in perfect cursive. If caught, it could mean serious punishment, but apparently the temptation to roast your rival in rhyme was too strong to resist. After poetry, you practice etiquette. Balancing a jade tablet on your head, you bow slowly, learning how to move like flowing water. You're drilled on how many steps to take before stopping, how long to hold your gaze before lowering it. Even your laughter has rules, soft, melodic, never showing teeth. Imagine being fined in social points every time you giggle wrong. Actually, palace life makes Instagram filters seem merciful. The lessons stretch on. Music, poetry, calligraphy, etiquette, all aimed at polishing you into a flawless jewel. But the irony, with hundreds of concubines vying for attention, many never got a chance to display these skills. You might train for years, only to perform once, or never. Scholars debate whether this was deliberate, a way to keep women occupied and distracted, or whether it was genuinely about cultivating a refined court culture. Either way, you're stuck memorizing verses while your stomach growls. The atmosphere in the lesson hall isn't entirely grim, though. There are moments of camaraderie. You catch another concubine's eye when her guqin string snaps dramatically, and both of you stifle a laugh. You overhear whispers about who played for the emperor last night, whether he yawned or smiled. Even within this rigid world, gossip sneaks in like ivy through cracks in stone. Comic relief time. First, when the jade tablet slides off your head and nearly smashes your foot, you realize grace is overrated. Second, your poetry brush leaves a huge ink blot and you think, well, at least my soul is boldly abstract. Third, as the instructor drones on about balance and posture, you can't help imagining her running a modern yoga class, complete with overpriced mats and cucumber water. By the time lessons end, you're drained. Your fingertips are sore from plucking strings, your knees ache from bowing, and your brain is stuffed with verses you'll forget by tomorrow. Yet you know you'll be back here again, repeating the same routines. The palace runs on cycles, bells, lessons, rituals, gossip. You're like a thread being woven into an endless tapestry. Whether you shine in the pattern or fade into the background, that's not really your choice. The sun has climbed higher now, light slanting through latticed windows, casting patterns on the floor. You step out of the lesson hall, squinting, adjusting the weight of your robes. Another part of the day is about to unfold, and your stomach reminds you that breakfast is both a blessing and a battlefield. Your stomach has been rumbling for a while now, and finally the promise of breakfast arrives. But don't imagine a cozy table spread with pancakes and coffee. Here, food is less about nourishment and more about politics on a porcelain plate. You step into a hall where lacquered tables gleam under shafts of sunlight. The smell of steamed rice, pickled vegetables, and delicate dumplings fills the air. For a brief moment you think, at least your belly will get some relief. Concubines file in, each lowering herself onto a cushion at her assigned spot. Rank dictates where you sit, closer to the head of the hall if you're higher, tucked at the back if you're not. Even before lifting chopsticks, the seating chart broadcasts everyone's status. One mainstream fact: palace meals were meticulously supervised, not only to prevent poisoning, but also to display hierarchy. The emperor's food was tested by eunuchs. The concubines' meals, though less scrutinized, were still watched by attendants to ensure no one received more than her due. Bowls of congee, plates of pickled radishes, slices of steamed fish, all served in measured portions. You're hungry enough to wolf it down, but etiquette rules clamp down harder than your appetite. Every bite must be small, every chew graceful, and no sound, absolutely no slurping. You sip your tea as quietly as possible, though steam fogs your painted face and makes your powder itch. Historians still argue whether emperors cared about concubines' table manners or whether these rituals were mostly for keeping women disciplined. But either way, the pressure was real. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some records claim that concubines would deliberately eat less in public, pretending to be delicate and refined, then sneak extra snacks later in private. Think of it as the original midnight fridge raid, though in this case it was usually a hidden stash of sesame cakes or candied fruits. The real breakfast drama, however, isn't the food, it's the silent sparring. You notice one concubine subtly angle her sleeve to show off a new embroidered cuff. Another lets out the faintest sigh, loud enough for others to hear, as if she's weighed down by some secret knowledge. Nobody says anything directly, but every gesture is a move in the game. You keep your eyes lowered, but your mind races. Who's rising? Who's falling? Is someone trying to signal the emperor through today's fashion choice? You can almost hear the invisible scorecards being tallied. The servants hover nervously, ensuring the right dishes reach the right hands. If a plate of dumplings meant for a higher-ranked concubine accidentally lands in front of someone else, that's more than a kitchen slip-up. It's a potential scandal. Punishments could rain down on everyone from cooks to maids. The palace ran on food, but also on fear. Comic relief, as promised. First, you bite into a dumpling that's piping hot, and your face contorts in silent agony while you pretend everything's fine. Second, when someone's chopsticks snap mid-bite, you nearly choke trying not to laugh. Third, as you sip your tea, you think, if Starbucks existed here, half the palace drama could be solved over frappuccinos. But beneath the humor, you can't ignore the tension. This isn't just breakfast, it's rehearsal for survival. Every glance, every morsel, every twitch of a painted eyebrow contributes to the long theater of palace politics. You finish your bowl, placing the chopsticks down just so, praying no one saw your earlier dumpling fiasco. After the meal, concubines drift into little clusters, murmuring like bees. Some exchange compliments that sting more than flatter. Your robe looks so simple today, very modest. Others disappear quickly, avoiding chatter altogether. You realize you're still hungry, but your hunger for food is nothing compared to the hunger for status that buzzes around you. When the last dishes are cleared and the eunuchs bow you out, the scent of tea leaves lingers on your sleeve. The courtyard outside feels colder, sharper, as though the air itself knows how much power was just contested over bowls of rice and broth. The day stretches ahead, and though breakfast is technically over, the flavor of rivalry remains on your tongue. The taste of tea still lingers on your tongue as you shuffle toward another corner of palace life. Religious offerings and omens. The Forbidden City wasn't just a fortress of politics. It was also a spiritual labyrinth, woven tight with ritual and superstition. You follow the others toward a small shrine, tucked behind carved screens where coils of incense smoke curl like lazy dragons. The air is heavy, sweet, almost dizzying. Concubines kneel on embroidered cushions, sleeves arranged just so, as attendants light sticks of incense. You press your palms together, bowing 3 times toward a gilded statue of Guanyin, the bodhisattva of compassion. A mainstream fact: Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucian rituals overlapped constantly at court. Concubines were expected to participate in these devotions as demonstrations of loyalty, purity, and moral grounding. Whether you believed or not didn't matter. Ritual was non-negotiable. Sometimes prayers were whispered for health, sometimes for a family back home, sometimes, let's be honest, for a little more imperial attention. Historians still argue whether the emperor genuinely valued these spiritual performances or simply tolerated them as part of palace order. But records show that offerings of incense, fruit, and silk cloth were a daily rhythm. Now for the quirky tidbit, some concubines kept tiny amulets sewn secretly into their sleeves, bits of jade carved with protective symbols, or even dried gecko tails believed to ward off misfortune. Imagine slipping your hand into a sleeve during a tense banquet and brushing against a little lizard relic, all in the name of safety. Ancient palace fashion, part couture, part talisman. The rituals go on. Bells chime softly and smoke thickens until it tickles your throat. You bow again, forehead brushing the cool surface of the prayer mat. Around you, some women whisper prayers so quietly they sound like rustling leaves. Others bow with theatrical vigor, hoping their devotion is noticed. Religion here doubles as performance, another layer of palace theater, and omens. Oh, the palace was obsessed with them. A dream about red birds could spark gossip that someone's fortune was rising. A sudden illness might be blamed on angry ancestors. Even the way incense smoke curled was scrutinized. If it drifted straight up, that was good luck. If it wavered sideways, maybe not so much. You find yourself staring at the smoke, trying to will it into behaving. Comic relief time. First, one concubine sneezes so explosively during prayers that everyone jumps, then pretends nothing happened. Second, you spot a tiny mouse scurrying behind the altar and think, great, now we're worshiping with Mickey. C0ncubines. Third, as the incense smoke burns your eyes, you wonder if spiritual enlightenment always feels like hay fever. Once the prayers end, fruit offerings are removed. Sometimes the concubines themselves nibble on them later, believing the blessed peaches or pears carry protective energy. Other times the fruit is distributed to servants, a silent way of currying favor with those who can gossip about your kindness. Even in piety, politics never disappears. As you rise from your cushion, legs tingling from kneeling too long, you notice the quiet shift in mood. Ritual has a way of calming nerves, at least for a moment. The women seem softer, their voices hushed as they step out into the sunlight again. But the peace is fragile. Already whispers start about who prayed longest, who wept a little too convincingly, who might be trying to signal divine approval. The courtyard beyond smells fresher after all that incense. Birds flit among the tiled eaves, and the sky seems wider. But you carry with you the sense that the palace isn't just ruled by the emperor's whims. It's also ruled by omens, rituals, and the endless human urge to believe that maybe, just maybe, unseen forces are on your side. The incense still clings faintly to your robes as the day drifts into its gentler hours. Now comes one of the rare respites, a stroll in the gardens. But don't let the word stroll fool you. These walks are carefully timed, meticulously observed, and far more political than they look. You step through a moon gate into a courtyard where stone pathways wind through peonies, willows, and ponds glinting under the sun. The sound of trickling water mingles with the rustle of silks, and for a fleeting moment, you almost forget you're trapped in a golden cage. The gardens of the Forbidden City were famous, designed to mimic miniature worlds. Rocks were piled like mountains, streams channeled like rivers, pavilions painted with bright dragons and phoenixes. Mainstream fact, imperial gardens weren't just for beauty. They symbolized cosmic harmony, the emperor's rule over heaven and earth. By walking here, you're literally pacing across a scaled-down universe. But while your feet glide over the stones, your mind knows the truth. This is also a stage. Concubines drift in small groups, their laughter soft, their eyes sharper than daggers. You join a pair of women by a lotus pond, listening to them comment on the blossoms. Their words sound harmless. How pure the lotus blooms. But you catch the undertone. In palace code, lotus purity could be a jab at someone's not-so-pure reputation. Historians still argue whether concubines wielded much actual influence or whether most of their power was gossip level, but it's undeniable that reputations lived or died in these quiet garden chats. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some concubines reportedly trained pet crickets to carry around in tiny cages, showing them off like good luck charms. Imagine pulling out a miniature bamboo cage mid-walk, saying, "Oh, this little guy chirps when fortune smiles." Palace ASMR, courtesy of insects. You stroll past a pavilion where two women practice calligraphy on waterstone slabs, their strokes evaporating in the sun. They exchange compliments so sugary they could rot your teeth, but you notice the glances, measuring, calculating. A slip of etiquette here, a stumble in posture there, and gossip will carry it faster than the wind. Even as you admire the garden's koi fish darting beneath lilies, you can't escape the feeling that you're under constant surveillance, not just by eunuchs and attendants, but by each other. Comic relief check-in. First, one concubine tries to step gracefully across a rock bridge, but nearly loses her shoe to the pond, her grace flopping like a fish. Second, as you watch koi gobble pellets, you think, at least someone in this palace eats freely. Third, when a pet cricket cage tips over, everyone gasps as if an emperor just fainted, except it's just one confused insect hopping for freedom. The stroll continues under carved trellises, the scent of wisteria heavy in the air. You tilt your face toward the sun, savoring the warmth, though you're careful not to squint too much. Wrinkles are social suicide here. Attendants linger nearby, reminding you that nothing you say is truly private. Still, in this setting, whispers grow bolder. A woman leans close to mention a rumor about who was summoned last night. Another hints that a rival's family back home may have fallen out of favor. The garden may look serene, but beneath its calm surface, it's buzzing louder than any cricket cage. By the time you return toward your quarters, your steps feel both lighter from the fresh air and heavier from the constant undercurrent of politics. The garden was beautiful, yes, but beauty here is never just beauty. It's backdrop for rivalry, theater for whispers, and a reminder that even when surrounded by blossoms, you're still tangled in thorns. The scent of garden blossoms fades as you return indoors, and now the afternoon brings something quieter: embroidery. It might sound peaceful, thread, silk, and time to yourself, but in the palace, even needlework is charged with meaning. You settle on a low stool, a wooden frame stretched with fine silk before you, the colors of thread gleaming like captured rainbows in small porcelain bowls. The air is still, broken only by the soft hiss of needles sliding through cloth. Embroidery isn't just busywork. Mainstream fact: in imperial China, a woman's needlework was considered a reflection of her virtue. A crooked stitch suggested a careless mind. Precise stitching proved discipline and refinement. In the concubine's world, displaying embroidery wasn't simply about art. It could secure favor, build alliances, or even serve as a subtle petition if gifted to the right hands. You lean closer, threading a needle with red silk. The pattern before you is a phoenix, wings outstretched. Symbol of the empress, of course. An audacious choice if stitched by anyone else. But concubines often walk that line, using imagery to hint at ambition. Historians still argue whether the women deliberately stitched such symbols to send coded messages, or whether they were just following traditional motifs. Either way, every thread you lay down carries the weight of interpretation. And here's the quirky tidbit. Some women hid tiny stitched words in the folds of flowers or wings. They'd embroider a secret plea or a mocking phrase so small it looked like decorative detail unless inspected closely. Imagine slipping a silk handkerchief to a friend that under careful study reads, "The soup yesterday was terrible." Ancient subtweeting in stitches. The room hums with concentration. You glance at others, one working on lotus blossoms, another on dragons coiled in gold thread. Occasionally a sigh escapes, fingers pricked by needles, eyes strained by the fine work. Attendants bring tea, but it goes cold as everyone bends forward, lost in their patterns. Yet even here, rivalry needles its way in. If one concubine produces an exquisite piece, she might display it subtly in her quarters. Knowing that word will travel, another might accidentally spill tea on a rival's nearly finished work, ruining weeks of effort. You keep your stitches tight, steady, and hope your work doesn't attract the wrong kind of attention. Comic relief, as promised. First, your thread knots itself into a hopeless tangle, and you mutter inside, "Even silk hates me." Second, a concubine pricks her finger, smearing a blot of blood across a white crane. Suddenly, the bird looks like it survived battle. Third, when your neighbor sighs dramatically for the fifth time, you wonder if she's sewing or auditioning for a tragedy. Still, there's undeniable beauty in the act. The silk shimmers under sunlight, threads glowing like water. The rhythm of needle and thread creates a meditative calm, almost hypnotic. For a moment, you lose yourself in the pattern, forgetting the politics, the pressure, the endless eyes. Just you, silk, and the illusion of control. But reality returns quickly. Finished pieces are collected, cataloged, sometimes even judged by palace officials. Your embroidery might end up as part of a robe, a cushion, or a decorative panel. Or it might vanish into storage, never to be seen again. That's the irony. You stitch for hours, pour patience into every thread, and the result could be forgotten in a dusty trunk. Yet you stitch anyway, because in the palace, even forgotten beauty is safer than idleness. By the time your eyes blur and your shoulders ache, the afternoon sun has shifted. You stretch your fingers, stiff from holding the needle too tightly. Another part of the day passes, another layer of expectation woven into your life. And as you set aside your work, you know the palace walls are filled not just with silks and stones, but with thousands of unseen stitches, each one carrying the quiet story of a woman like you. Your fingers are still sore from embroidery when the rhythm of the day softens again. This time it's leisure, or at least what passes for leisure in a place where everything is shadowed by watchful eyes. You gather with other concubines in a shaded pavilion, the carved beams painted with curling dragons, while attendants bring trays of carved ivory game pieces, dice, and scrolls filled with riddles. To anyone outside, it might look like carefree fun, but you know better. Even playtime in the palace doubles as a battlefield. Mainstream fact, games like Weiqi, what we now call Go, and Jiangqi, Chinese chess, were popular pastimes, especially among the literate elite. For concubines, learning to play them wasn't just amusement. It showed intelligence, patience, and strategy, all qualities valued at court. Imagine sitting across from a rival, each of you placing black and white stones on a wooden board, every move a thinly veiled metaphor for who might outmaneuver the other in real life. You pick up a riddle scroll. The characters twist into clever puzzles, questions about nature, philosophy, or wordplay. Solving them earns nods of admiration, a subtle kind of status. Historians still argue whether the emperor ever listened to these little competitions, but they agree that wit was one of the safest tools a concubine had. It made you memorable without being openly ambitious. Now for the quirky tidbit, secret notes were sometimes hidden in the folds of game boards or passed under the guise of riddle answers. A concubine might send a coded message to a friend or an enemy, wrapped inside a clever poem. Imagine lifting a chess piece only to find a sliver of silk tucked beneath it, carrying words like, "Beware of her smile." It's espionage disguised as entertainment. The pavilion buzzes with quiet laughter, though every smile has an edge. One concubine teases another about always losing at Go. The other replies sweetly, "Losing to you is my honor." Her tone is sharp as a needle. You can feel the layers of meaning. Is it genuine flattery or a warning wrapped in sugar? Comic relief arrives, as always. First, one woman rolls the dice so hard they bounce into a teacup, splashing her robe. Second, a parrot in a nearby cage suddenly squawks out something that sounds suspiciously like a eunuch's name, causing giggles to ripple. Third, you try to solve a riddle about a house with no doors and no windows, but keep picturing your own chamber, which feels exactly like that. As you lean over the go board, your eyes trace the black and white stones. They spread like a map of conquest, little territories carved out with each turn. The irony isn't lost on you. Here you sit, playing pretend wars while real battles of status unfold silently around you. Beyond the pavilion, you hear faint music drifting from another hall, someone practicing guqin or flute. The sound mixes with the chatter here, a reminder that leisure is just another mask, another layer of the endless performance. Even laughter has strategy. You glance at the sky, the sun edging lower, shadows stretching longer across the courtyard. The games wind down, pieces collected, riddles folded away, but the undercurrents remain. You leave the pavilion knowing that even a round of chess isn't safe from intrigue, that even riddles can turn into traps. And yet a small part of you clings to the comfort of those moments, laughing at dice in teacups, groaning at riddles too clever by half. In a life where you own nothing and decide nothing, a shared game can still feel like a sliver of freedom. Thin, fragile, but enough to make you breathe a little easier before the next demand of palace life calls you back. The games are cleared away, laughter dissolves, and once again the tone shifts. Leisure gives way to health rituals because in the palace, staying alive and staying radiant was practically an occupation. You head back into the quarters where trays of steaming bowls and small porcelain cups await. This isn't lunch, it's medicine hour. Mainstream fact: traditional Chinese medicine was deeply integrated into palace life. Concubines were expected to drink tonics, teas and soups believed to strengthen their qi, preserve beauty, and guard against illness. Doctors trained in pulse-taking and herbal prescriptions rotated through the Forbidden City, always under the suspicious gaze of eunuchs to ensure no poison slipped in. You lift a cup filled with something murky, ginseng boiled with jujube dates. It tastes earthy, slightly sweet, and clings to your tongue. Supposedly, it boosts energy and fertility, two commodities more valuable than gold in your world. Another bowl holds turtle shell jelly, said to cool the blood and clear the skin. Historians still argue whether these remedies genuinely worked, or whether they functioned more as rituals of reassurance. Either way, refusing to drink wasn't an option. Now for the quirky tidbit, some records suggest concubines use crocodile dung mixed with herbs as a bizarre skincare concoction. Yes, you heard right. Crocodile dung. Imagine slathering that on your face and pretending it's a luxury spa treatment. Somewhere, ancient estheticians must have been chuckling. You sip cautiously, trying not to grimace. Around you, other women cradle their cups with forced elegance. One gulps too quickly and coughs, earning disapproving glances. Another brags softly that her tonic was made with rare deer antler shavings, as if rarity alone guarantees results. Status echoes even in medicine. Who gets the better herbs? Who gets the fresher ingredients? Comic relief arrives like clockwork. First, you nearly choke when your tonic tastes suspiciously like boiled socks. Second, one concubine wrinkles her nose so dramatically at the smell of turtle jelly that you nearly laugh aloud. Third, you think, if kale smoothies ever make it here, this palace will implode. The rituals extend beyond drinking. Attendants bring ointments of pearl powder mixed with honey, rubbed gently on the hands to prevent dryness. Some concubines hold jade rollers to their cheeks, claiming the cool stone chases away wrinkles. One maid fans a woman to help her sweat out toxins. Unmerely, it looks less like medicine and more like a very strange spa day, yet no one dares mock it openly. Behind the scenes, rumors swirl. Who has been prescribed fertility tonics? Who has been told to rest? Who might be secretly ill? In a system where bearing children can change your fate, even the emperor's physicians become players in palace intrigue. A prescription isn't just health advice, it's a political signal. You place your empty cup back on the tray, throat still tingling from ginseng. The room smells of herbs, musk, and faint bitterness, as though medicine itself has seeped into the walls. Your stomach churns a little, and you can't help but wonder if these potions are keeping you alive or slowly draining you. Still, you understand the game. Whether or not the tonics truly work, drinking them shows obedience. Obedience shows discipline. Discipline keeps you in the running, even on days when all you've swallowed is a mix of roots, shells, and things you'd rather not identify. As the trays are cleared away, you stretch your shoulders, the faint ache of embroidery mixing with the heaviness of medicine. Outside, the sun has shifted again, the day wearing down. But inside, you're reminded that in the palace, survival isn't just about wit or beauty. It's also about enduring whatever concoction they place in your bowl and smiling as though it's nectar from heaven. The bitter aftertaste of ginseng still lingers when the air around you tightens. Playtime and medicine are behind you, but now comes the part of palace life whispered about most. Jealousy, rivalry, the endless tug of war under painted smiles. You head back through the corridors, silks brushing against silks, and though no one speaks too loudly, you can feel the static of tension sparking between glances. Mainstream fact: the imperial harem was structured like a pyramid. At the top stood the empress. Beneath her, the consorts, then the concubines, and finally the lower-ranked attendants. The system wasn't just about who the emperor liked. It was about control. Each rank fought to hold its place, and every woman was aware that a slip in favor could push her down. As you pass a pavilion, you overhear a sharp exchange disguised as polite chatter. One concubine praises another's embroidery, her tone syrupy sweet, then casually adds, "Such small stitches. One almost needs a magnifying glass to see them." A compliment? Maybe. A jab at insignificance? Definitely. Historians still argue whether these rivalries were exaggerated by later storytellers to make palace life sound like soap operas, but enough anecdotes survive to suggest that sabotage was very real. And here's your quirky tidbit. There are tales of women sprinkling ground glass into rivals' food. Not enough to kill, but enough to cause illness and suspicion. Some accounts may be exaggerated, but palace kitchens were heavily monitored for a reason. The idea alone was enough to keep everyone on edge. The jealousy isn't always lethal. Sometimes it's smaller, pettier, a hairpin misplaced, a robe mysteriously stained, an attendant accidentally delivering the wrong message at the wrong time. You realize that surviving here isn't about dazzling the emperor. It's about dodging the constant tripwires your peers set. Comic relief, because even palace rivalries need punchlines. First, you overhear someone sneer, "Her poetry is so rustic," and you imagine palace Yelp reviews. Second, when two women glare at each other over a chessboard, you swear you can feel the pieces sweating. Third, as you watch one concubine dramatically faint during a tense moment, you think, Oscar-worthy, but she forgot to fall on the cushion. You tread carefully, keeping your expression neutral. Too much joy, and you're flaunting. Too much sorrow, and you're weak. The safest face is the unreadable one, but even that can be misinterpreted. You're reminded that palace life is like walking a balance beam blindfolded. One misstep, and you don't just fall, you're pushed. Sometimes jealousy escalates. Stories circulate about women punished for spreading rumors, exiled to cold palaces where loneliness gnawed louder than hunger. You imagine those dark chambers, far from the warmth of the emperor's halls, and you shiver despite the afternoon sun. It's a reminder that the real danger here isn't the emperor's wrath. It's the rivals beside you, smiling with painted lips while calculating your downfall. And yet, amidst the rivalry, alliances bloom. Small groups form, sisterhoods of convenience, women who protect each other from harsher storms. But loyalty in the harem is brittle. Today's ally can become tomorrow's rival if favor shifts. You understand why many concubines wrote poetry dripping with loneliness. It was the safest way to scream without making a sound. By the time the lanterns are lit, your nerves are taut as bowstrings. The palace looks serene, painted in soft evening light, but you know better. Beneath the calm, currents of jealousy ripple stronger than ever. You exhale slowly, aware that the night may bring either fortune or disaster, and not always from the emperor's hand. Lanterns flicker to life along the corridors. Their glow warm but unsteady, as if the palace itself holds its breath. Evening is here, and with it comes the most nerve-wracking ritual of all, the emperor's summons. You sit in your chamber, surrounded by attendants smoothing your sleeves, retouching your powdered face, and whispering reminders of etiquette. Your heart pounds even though you might not be chosen. That's the paradox. You wait every night, dreading and desiring at the same time. Mainstream fact, the process was often formal. Eunuchs would deliver the emperor's command to summon a woman, sometimes even physically carrying her bedding to signify selection. Records show that the imperial household had a whole bureaucratic system to track which concubine spent which night where. It wasn't random romance, it was paperwork wrapped in silks. You hear footsteps in the hallway. Every shuffle of shoes makes your stomach twist. Maybe tonight, maybe not. Historians still argue whether the emperor's choices were purely personal or manipulated by ministers, eunuchs, or even the empress herself. Some chronicles suggest that chance selections were carefully engineered to keep political factions balanced. In other words, love was rarely the point. Now for the quirky tidbit, some concubines, when not summoned, would place little charms under their pillows, herbal sachets or carved jade tokens, hoping to attract imperial dreams. Imagine a medieval vision board, except it smells like dried mugwort. Tonight, you are not chosen. Relief mixes with disappointment, a cocktail you drink in silence. Another concubine's name echoes down the corridor, and you catch the flicker of triumph in her eyes as she rises. She disappears with attendants, her silk robes swishing like waves. The rest of you bow your heads, pretending indifference, though jealousy needles every heart. Comic relief time. First, one concubine whispers too loudly, "Better her than me. My tonic hasn't kicked in yet," and you nearly snort. Second, an attendant fusses so long over your hair that you mutter internally, "If the emperor hasn't picked me by now, this bun isn't saving me." Third, as the chosen woman glides past, her jade hairpin clinks against the doorframe with a loud thunk. So much for perfect grace. But humor doesn't erase the tension. The chosen concubine knows that tonight could elevate her standing or expose her to danger. Favor brings gifts, influence, sometimes even political leverage, but it also paints a target on your back. Tomorrow, rivals will whisper, "Was she charming or did she stumble? Did the emperor smile or did he sigh?" A single evening could reshape months of careful maneuvering. And for those not chosen, the weight itself is corrosive. You return to your chamber, attendants blowing out extra lamps, the silence pressing harder than the walls. You wonder if you'll ever be summoned, if your embroidered robes and practice songs will rot unused. Some women waited years without hearing their names. Others were summoned once, then forgotten. The palace breeds not just rivalry, but deep, aching uncertainty. Outside, the corridors glow with lanterns, and the night air hums with crickets. Somewhere behind closed doors, the emperor dines, laughs, or grows weary. You're not part of it tonight. You lie on your thin mattress, pulse still racing, staring at the painted beams overhead. The palace feels vast, yet suffocating, every shadow whispering that your fate is out of your hands. And so you drift into uneasy sleep, half hoping, half dreading that tomorrow might bring the knock at your door. The night stretches long, and though your name wasn't called, sleep doesn't come easily. Instead, you sit up in the dim glow of an oil lamp, brush in hand, and turn to one of the few private acts still yours: writing. The scratch of ink against paper is soft, almost like a whisper in the silence. Mainstream fact: many concubines were literate, especially those drawn from scholarly families. They were encouraged, or required, to practice calligraphy and compose poetry, partly to entertain, partly to demonstrate refinement. Some of these writings survive today, delicate verses about moonlight, longing, or the sting of isolation. They're treasures not just for their artistry, but because they give us rare glimpses of voices otherwise drowned out by palace bureaucracy. You dip your brush again, watching the ink pool and spread across the fibers of the paper. The words you write are half poetry, half diary. You described the garden walk earlier, the koi swirling like gold ribbons. You confess the bitterness of the tonic that still clings to your tongue. It's a way of stitching together your day, of holding on to pieces of yourself before they dissolve into routine. Historians still argue whether these writings were meant as personal therapy or calculated records designed to be discovered later, but either way, they shimmer with raw humanity. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some concubines reportedly wrote tiny poems on slips of silk, then tucked them into embroidered cushions or folded them into fans. Imagine some palace maid decades later, fluffing a cushion only to discover a secret verse sighing out from the past. Tonight, your hand trembles slightly, both from fatigue and from the weight of your thoughts. You pause to gaze at the paper lantern swaying above you, shadows dancing like restless spirits across the walls. Around you, the palace is hushed, yet you can feel the lives breathing in neighboring chambers, all of you bound by the same silks and the same waiting. Comic relief is never far away. First, a drop of ink splatters across your sleeve, and you sigh, "Perfect, fashion statement of the year." Second, your brush tip frays mid-stroke, turning your calligraphy into something resembling chicken scratches. Third, as you reach for another sheet of paper, you knock over the inkstone, and the splatter looks suspiciously like a startled duck. Despite the mishaps, you keep writing. Words flow like a lifeline, giving shape to emotions you can't express aloud. Loneliness, yes. Frustration, often. But also flickers of joy, a shared laugh over a game piece, the sweetness of a stolen candied fruit, the shimmer of moonlight on glazed tiles. These small details become anchors, reminders that you're more than just a pawn in palace politics. Some women write letters they'll never send, imaginary conversations with family left behind, or with children they hope to bear. Others compose verses to the emperor himself, carefully folded into poems he may never read. You wonder which kind of writer you are. Perhaps a bit of both. When you finally set down the brush, your hand aches, but your heart feels lighter. You blow gently on the page, watching the ink dry, then fold the sheet and slip it beneath your pillow. Whether it will ever be found doesn't matter. What matters is that, for a brief hour, you shaped your own voice in a place determined to silence it. The oil lamp flickers low. You lie back, the faint smell of ink mixing with the musk of your robe, and close your eyes. Words circle your thoughts as you drift, weaving themselves into dreams. Tomorrow the cycle will begin again, but tonight at least, your story belongs to you. The night fades into pale dawn, and with it comes the harsh reminder that palace life isn't all silks and poetry. For every concubine who climbs the ladder of favor, there are others who slip. And when they do, the fall is brutal. You hear whispers of punishments, banishments, stories pass like cold drafts through corridors. Even if you haven't faced them yourself, the possibility hangs over you like a shadow. Mainstream fact: concubines who lost favor could be reassigned to remote quarters known as cold palaces. These were not luxurious retreats. They were damp, drafty, and meant to erase you from the emperor's sight. To be sent there was less about physical suffering than about social death. Without attendants, without visitors, a woman could vanish into obscurity within months. You pass by a shuttered wing and feel the weight of its silence. Somewhere behind those doors, someone once embroidered, laughed, or played music. Now only dust and echoes remain. Historians still argue whether the cold palace was an official institution or more of a symbolic punishment. Regardless, the effect was real. Women feared isolation more than illness. Quirky tidbit for today: palace rumor claimed that some concubines, desperate to escape, pretended to be possessed by spirits. A sudden fit or eerie chant might earn them exile instead of harsher punishment. Better to be labeled mad than to remain trapped in rivalry forever. Punishments varied. Sometimes it was as small as losing privileges, fewer attendants, simpler clothes. Other times, harsher. Tales speak of beatings ordered for breaches of etiquette, or demotions that stripped women of their titles overnight. And always, always the threat of poison loomed, whether whispered in gossip or recorded in scandalous chronicles. Comic relief time, because even shadows need levity. First, you imagine a concubine in a cold palace, demanding Wi-Fi to at least stream dramas. Second, when an attendant scolds you for yawning, you think, better yawn than stab someone with embroidery scissors. Third, as you hear someone exaggerate a punishment story, she sneezed and was exiled for life. You can't help rolling your eyes. Still, beneath the jokes, the truth presses in. Survival requires constant vigilance. One careless remark, one jealous rival's whisper, and you could be gone. The system isn't fair. It isn't even consistent. Sometimes women were punished not for what they did, but for what others claimed they did. The palace was less a home and more a stage where even backstage accidents could end the performance. And yet resilience flickers here too. Some women survived banishment, living quietly until politics shifted and they were recalled. Others used punishment as a chance to write, pray, or retreat from rivalry. Stories tell of concubines who endured decades of obscurity only to re-emerge when a new emperor took pity. Survival wasn't guaranteed, but neither was disappearance absolute. As you walk past the shuttered wing again, the air feels colder, though the sun is rising. You think of the women who came before you, who endured, who vanished, who resisted in small ways. Their stories are warnings, yes, but also reminders. Even in silence, survival is an act of defiance. The palace breathes around you, a mixture of beauty and menace. You straighten your back, adjust your jade hairpin, and step forward. For now, you're still here, still walking the balance beam, still threading the needle between favor and ruin. The palace has shown you dawn bells, painted brows, whispered rivalries, and nights filled with anxious waiting. Yet beyond all of this, there's one last question lingering in your mind. What becomes of the women when the palace years fade? Do they leave behind anything more than powdered faces and embroidered cushions? The answer, like everything else here, is layered. Mainstream fact: some concubines became empresses or dowager empresses, wielding immense influence over court politics. Others, less fortunate, were forgotten entirely. Their names erased from records, their lives reduced to anonymous shadows behind lacquered screens. History itself was selective, remembering only those who fit the narrative of dynasty and power. Historians still argue whether most concubines lived tragic lives or whether some found satisfaction in the rare stability the palace offered. No backbreaking farm work, no forced marriages, at least material security. But legacy isn't only official. Quirky tidbit, centuries-old gossip poems still survive, cheeky verses written by palace attendants poking fun at concubines' quirks. Imagine being remembered not for your embroidery, but for the way you snored at night or spilled soup on your sleeve. Small human details can outlast dynastic glory. You sit by a window, the evening air drifting in cool against your powdered cheek. Lanterns glow, casting soft halos on the tiled courtyard. Around you, generations of women have lived, loved, schemed, and suffered. Their stories ripple outward, even now, shaping how the world imagines palace life. Comic relief, one last time. First, you picture future historians flipping through records and misinterpreting Jade Roller as some ancient scooter. Second, you imagine concubines filming palace vlogs if smartphones had existed. Third, you wonder if the emperor himself would survive one day in a modern office meeting, probably not without summoning someone for tea. But beneath the jokes, a gentle truth emerges. These women, for all their gilded cages and silken masks, were human. Lonely, ambitious, frightened, hopeful. They stitched themselves into history, not just through children or titles, but through poems, prayers, rivalries, and even their daily rituals. You close your eyes listening to the hum of the palace in your imagination. The distant bells, the shuffle of slippers, the rustle of silk. Their world was fragile, beautiful, and treacherous, yet filled with moments of resilience. That resilience, more than anything, is their true legacy. And now, as your own night deepens, it's time to let the palace fade into silence. The corridors grow quieter, lantern flames dipping low, their light trembling like fireflies in glass. You let the echo of footsteps fade until only the hush of the gardens remains, leaves rustling in the night breeze. The weight of silk, the sting of rivalries, the endless rhythm of bells, all of it softens, as though the palace itself exhales after a long performance. Picture the embroidered cushions resting untouched, the guqin strings stilled, the incense coils burning down to quiet ash. In the stillness, even jealousy loses its voice, and what lingers is only the fragile heartbeat of women who once dreamed, feared, and waited under these same painted beams. The night air is cool, almost tender, carrying the faint scent of pine smoke. You breathe it in slowly, deeply, letting the rhythm calm your thoughts. The palace fades further, turning from stone and silk into memory until it feels less like a cage and more like a distant story whispered through time. You are no longer walking narrow corridors. You are drifting gently, as if carried by a current that knows exactly where to take you. The ink stains, the gossip, the anxieties of summons, let them dissolve. What remains is only the quiet, the softness of fabric against your skin, the steady hum of your own breathing, and as you lie back safe in your own world, you realize that the true legacy of those long-gone women isn't rivalry or power. It is the reminder that even in confinement, people create beauty, find humor, and hold on to hope. That's the thread that endures. So close your eyes, let the palace slip away, and rest.